Yeah, so the headline on this particular article is Eccentric-Training Controversies Resolved.
Absolutely.
So first, if you could please lay out the differences between concentric and eccentric muscle actions, and then tell us why eccentric has had controversy attached to it.
Without a doubt, the concentric action, as all fitness pros know, is when we're shortening. And, I think you could see me right now here. I'm doing a bicep curl, the shortening, component right now. And the lengthening is lengthening under load. So everyone knows the eccentric, is the lengthening component of the muscle during any action. The concentric is the shortening component of the muscle. And there has been at least a 2-decade controversy, and it's so close right now that we may could see it going on, which is most effective for hypertrophy and for strength. And the big message is they're both wonderful. And if you're striving with a client to achieve strength and hypertrophy, you're going to do both of them. We'll talk a little bit about what may be the best techniques very shortly as we proceed. But one of the big controversies that's been resolved is which really is more effective. This wonderful study from Dr. Brad Schoenfeld, which was a meta-analysis and systematic review, one of the most comprehensive studies that we can do, showed that there wasn't a statistical difference between eccentric and concentric in developing hypertrophy and developing size, but practically there was. The concentric increase on an average was 6.8%. The eccentric on hypertrophy was 10%. So Sandy, our take-home message is a controversy it's actually been at least 20 years, is eccentric is slightly better, but in the article, Brad says you must do both. And of course, if you're doing normal resistance training, you are doing both. But that was a major controversy resolved, without a doubt.
Okay, great. So the next study in this review you did for the May-June issue, Mayo, M-A-E-O, et al., examine the neuromuscular adaptations after maximal eccentric versus concentric when matched for total work. What did they find out?
I think the biggest change for all of us was that with eccentric training, the hypertrophy changes are sooner. They saw significant changes in as little as 4 weeks with eccentric, and it was much longer than concentric. They have some incredible neuromuscular adaptations that our bodies do to this eccentric, which result in showing significance much sooner. I think that was the big take home from that particular study.
Okay. And then you reviewed 2 other studies within this article, and I really I want to dig into this because it is just a super neat topic. Morowitz et al. In a 2020 systematic review aimed to evaluate studies published through May 2018, examining if sex-related differences to acute maximal eccentric exercise in healthy men and women exist in terms of delayed onset soreness, post-exercise creatine kinase levels, and eccentric muscle strength. What were their conclusions?
Well, what's so interesting with men and women, when they normalize for areas like actual muscle, and this is, normalizing for the statistical analysis, there was no difference between men and women in physiological adaptations. And everybody is always, compared men to women and has not normalized, from a standpoint of specific lean muscle mass, but the adaptations were not different, between the sexes, which was really very interesting. Women tend to have a little bit more of a strength gain loss after an eccentric training bout, a challenging eccentric bout. And so the researchers suggested that maybe take a little longer recovery period between sessions before they do it again. Now,
Okay.
that was a really big finding. Men had a much bigger increase in a marker for muscle soreness. Creatine kinase is an enzyme that we see is a marker for what's called muscle damage. When there's been, a little bit of I call it kind of like shock to muscle. There's a little bit of damage, and there's little byproducts of that shock. One of the enzymes is creatine kinase. Men have a higher level of creatine kinase than women at matched intensities. But what the researchers hypothesize is it's due to women having estrogen. Estrogen has some incredible physiological mechanisms which enhance blood flow into muscle and the removal of waste products out of muscle. It's like blood flow hemodynamics. And it really essentially helps the women remove these muscle damage byproducts. So that was a really fascinating finding as well. And then one more finding, Sandy: no difference in muscle soreness between the genders. So when everything is matched, we're a lot similar than what we originally thought for years.
Yeah. So my takeaway as a female would be that I'm probably going to have some more, strength loss after an eccentric bout, potentially. I will have less DOMs and I get more rest
Yeah,
in between bouts.
and I would say you got it 100% correct. And then, Sandy, I know we got one more study. I really like to go the 4-second eccentric. We that's still unanswered. We've done a research study at our school. We found, the 4, 5, and 6 very, very effective. But I like the 4-second because I think it's so doable for people. And if you can make something really doable, then they're going to want to do it again. And that, I think, is the key.
And I think it's hard when you're training, it's hard to slow down. So if you're talking a 6-second eccentric load, that's a lot to process, and it just feels like it takes forever, right?
Absolutely. And from our research, we didn't see any significant difference. And you want to make it so it's like, wow, I'm enjoying this, but I don't want to feel like I'm labored in doing it.
Right. I can handle 4 seconds. Most people can handle 4 seconds.
Absolutely. And you notice for strength and hypertrophy, we do it's really kind of a 1 second up. Some people pause and then the 4-second down. But remember, for those circuit training for VO2 max, we're going 1-1, 1 second concentric, 1 second eccentric. Right. Yeah.
Right. So more it's that hit, what do we call it? The hit hybrid?
The hybrid hit or the hit hybrid?
Hybrid hit. All right.
We got one more great study that we're going to talk about.
One more great study in this eccentric review you did. There's a great deal of interest in finding the optimal level of eccentric training intensity for athletes and exercise enthusiasts who want to develop stronger muscles. So the final study you covered from Schroeder, Hawkins, and Jack looked into this. What does the evidence suggest to you?
This was an incredible find. It's the one and only find. With eccentric training, they had a population of women, untrained women, no resistance training prior to doing this particular study. And in eccentric training, because you're lowering the weight, you can lower much greater than what you can lift. So they compared 6 exercises with 2 different types of methodology. In one methodology, the women lowered on all the exercises at 75% of their 1 RM. Now, with this study, it was an incredible study. They have a personal trainer who actually helps them lift it up. So it's totally eccentric only. And then they lower. One group lowered at 75% of their 1 RM, the one lift they can lift the most. The other group lowered at 125%. Now, why this study blows everybody away is we've always felt that the higher intensity is so much better than, the 75% at 1RM compared to 125% 1RM. That's a world difference.
Yeah.
A 16-week study, 6 exercises, women, they all improved their 1RM 20 to 40% on every exercise. And
Whoa.
guess what? There was no difference in the 75% of 1RM versus the 125% of 1RM. And I'm still amazed. I cannot explain it. Nobody can explain it. But it's great because now all the fitness pros throughout the world can put their patients, their clients on these incredible eccentric training programs at 75% of 1RM. There's no torque, there's no stress on the joints. They can do it on their own. This, to me, was the biggest study in the world, what they shared.
And was this both men and women?
No,
It was
women
just
only.
so
Women only.
I have one word for you. Estrogen.
Estrogen. Go. Actually, I could share with you my hypothesis, just so you know. Everyone, fitness pros out there, everyone, here's my hypothesis. We know there's one physiological advantage women have over men that men can't even come close. It's called neural drive. The message from the brain to the muscle to contract and keep contracting and keep contracting and keep contracting, because some women go through something in their life where they may be in labor, not just for hours, but for days, and that's all neural drive. And I think this shows that the neural drive that's my hypothesis, is so powerful that the 75% had just as good as the 125% because they had that neural drive on that higher intensity. That's why I believe it's just a submission from Len Kravitz. But the great news is, unbelievable. We can now design these incredible studies, and they're just, we know it works. We know it works.
I love it. That's great stuff. So to summarize, what do you suggest personal trainers and coaches do with the info? And can they apply it with most of their client populations? Is there anybody they should not be doing eccentric training with?
Without a doubt. In the article, as you know, there's an opinion editorial from these very, very famous scientists who say that even with that frail, the frail elderly, to keep them from losing muscle mass, eccentric training should be a component of their training program, because a lot of people can lower the weight with much more weight than they can lift it.
Right.
And so for the frail elderly, they may be better with, a fitness pro helping them on the concentric and lowering on the eccentric themselves. And they may prevent sarcopenia, the loss of muscle. And so I think that is a real major take home, because as people age, we just don't want them losing that muscle. Muscle is incredibly important, for so many life sustaining processes.
Yes, indeed.